Hey guys, what's up? It's New. Welcome back to the channel. Today I want to talk about one of my very favorite recent additions to this Flicker Strike Invoker crit variant of a build, and that's going to be the passive persistent buff skill, Charge Infusion, which actually does some really cool and interesting things to any sort of charge-based build. In this case, I'm actually getting two different types of charges, trying to really take advantage of it. I want you to take a look. There's a reason why I'm playing this in the background, and it's all zoomed up. Look at the charges there. They're so much bigger and more obvious, and honestly, one of the best things about this is you can actually see the charges on your character. I've had players ask me, hey, what is this MTX you're using? It seems like some sort of pay-to-win thing, right? Because it would actually change how you can visualize the game and maybe make a split-second decision. Do I Flicker Strike? Oh, do I have power charges? Let's see on my character. Oh, I can see I have these huge power charges floating around me. And they're like 5 times bigger with this buff. So if you're wondering why the Frenzy and or power charges look huge like this, it's because of this passive buff. One major plus to it. But I'm going to be talking about some of the downsides for this and some of the upsides for it. And I really, really like it at the end. At the tail end of the higher end version of this build, it's kind of obvious because I'm going crit. So if you read into the skill, you'll see it offers an awful lot of power for anyone playing crit. Everyone loves skill speed. Everyone loves defenses too, some more than others. I'm not taking advantage of the endurance charge side of things on here, but it could be technically possible. But anyway, I'm very excited to be talking about this because I feel like almost nobody is. I even went online to look on YouTube and typed in Charge Infusion, PoE2, into YouTube, and nothing comes up. It's just videos chock full of videos about how to acquire charges in your build, which makes sense why that would be a big focus. But I think people are going to want to look beyond that at some point and want to see how they can elevate their power and or frenzy and or endurance charge game. So let's get into the video. I'm going to talk about the downsides first. Probably the biggest downside of Charge Infusion will be the fact that, of course, it is a skill gem, which means it takes a skill slot, and that is no small thing. That can be an absolute deal breaker for some people depending on how tight their build is. I mean, I, for one, have an unset ring, and I've had one for quite some time to unlock that 10th slot because, I have Spirit to spare, and I'm trying to get in as much value as I can into the build. In some cases, it's not that impressive, whatever the 10th skill is, but a lot of times it's really enabling. For example, if it meant I had to drop Grim Feast or something, that would cost me a ton of survivability. If I had to drop Lingering Illusion, that would cost me a very convenient way to acquire power charges. If I had to drop, a Herald, that would greatly affect my clear. So you get the idea. It can be really costly, and I wouldn't necessarily want to drop any of those things for Charge Infusion. But if I have the room for it, that's great. I can put it as a skill slot, and then I can tie in Clarity or Precision. For some reason, I'm not running any other passive buff-based skills. That's a convenient place to put these in here. Of course, you can do that. Okay, and then the other major thing is it is a skill that costs Spirit. Now, fortunately, it's on the lower end. It's only 30 Spirit, but that does mean you have to have a lot of Spirit to be able to fit it in. And so with me, with my current build, and this is linked down in max roll down below, I require 240 Spirit to do this because I have 6 left over, and then I have, Clarity and Precision, which honestly aren't that necessary. It's nice to have these in as they just help a little bit with the accuracy and the mana regain. Yeah, you can see I have 6 left over, and then my chest is extremely high evasion. And I haven't quite done the math on this. It's probably somewhere around 2,300 evasion, which is required to get that much Spirit. And that's because, and we'll just go ahead and show it all the way, gain 1 Spirit for every 15 evasion rating on equipped body armor. Cannot gain Spirit from equipment. So a lot of other classes have to worry about Spirit. They have to get it on the amulet. They have to get it on this. They have to get it on that. The monk is very fortunate. We don't have to do that, at least if we're wearing, a real chest. Which can be a problem because a lot of people want to run Queen of the Forest or Temporalis or something else that's going to greatly enhance your clear speed otherwise. But Flicker Strike already has some embedded in clear speed capacity, which I think is granted me the reason to not necessarily go one of those other 2 overpowered chests that currently exist in the game. One other quick downside to Charge Infusion, it's actually a downside and an upside, so we're going to lead into the upside. But what I want to say is that it consumes 1 of each charge every 5.7 seconds. Now that might sound really, really awful if you don't have great charge acquisition. Like if, for example, you're just relying on the Resonance Keystone with Combat Frenzy, that's going to put a lot of hurt on you because you're really not getting a huge amount of charges in a short period of time, even after the buff. But if you're somebody who's using this tech, for example, which I have a separate video on, which involves Minion Pact on Tempest Flurry and involves Persistence on Lingering Illusion, and then you just roll and then you just attack real quick and you just get power charges for days, you can see that I can get power charges whenever I want. And then I also have Profane Ritual, which we'll take a look at in a moment. I actually have two separate ways I'm getting power charges, so that they just come flooding in, of course. But you can see that my charges are disappearing, not after the timer runs out, they're just actually just disappearing slowly over time. And so that is, of course, a downside, especially if you only have like 1 or 2 and you go down to 0, that can hurt. And it definitely hurts a fair bit when you are looking at the Frenzy Charge acquisition. For me, I'm not really getting Frenzy Charges super reliably, so I'm not necessarily taking advantage of that angle. At any rate, the fact that it consumes charges is actually an upside in certain aspects, and the biggest one would be the small nodes leading up to overflowing power. I mean, basically anyone who is stacking power charges is going to go for overflowing power. And on the way, it says 20% increased critical damage bonus if you've consumed a power charge recently. And I know that nobody really thinks much of this. They're just like, well, okay, I'm going to be casting Falling Thunder, I'm going to be casting Charge Staff, or I'm going to be casting Flicker Strike, therefore consuming charges. But no, this actually also applies to this language right here. It says it consumes one of each charge, and you can actually see that in the damage side. If we look at crit up here, you can see that my crit chance, or my crit damage, goes up. It goes down for a split second, and it goes right back up again, because recently is 4 seconds, and then it's consuming one every, I think it was 5.1 seconds. So you do the math, it basically has like 80% uptime on this automatically. And now, of course, it's like 100% uptime in combat, more than likely, but it just makes it nice because, in between combat moments or whatever, it's very likely to be up. So this is my default crit chance and crit damage bonus here, and we're going to take a look at this now, because in order to take full advantage of the power charge component, you need to have a lot of crit, right? Because if we read down in here, it says 20% more critical hit chance while you have a power charge, even one power charge. So I'm going to get a power charge, and we're going to see this number go all the way up to 50. Wow, 50%. That's pretty wild. If I take it off, then it goes back down. So you can see this is giving me about 20% more critical strike chance. Very important to point out that that is a more multiplier. Those of you who know Path of Exile, that's a very important language. More is not increase. It's generally way more powerful than an increase multiplier, because that's its own separate bucket. This is its own separate multiplier now here. More critical strike chance. And so the more critical strike hit chance you have, the greater the impact of a more multiplier. So that means this becomes exponentially powerful as you gear up crit or focus on crit. And with the attribute stacking variant of this build, I can't even prioritize crit very well. I could get crit multi as a corruption or, the runes, but I can't get crit chance on the staff, but I could if I had a real staff. So there might come a time later on when we, might get nerfed to the ground on the attribute stacking side of things, and we'll need to use a real staff, in which case this will be even more potent, because this number will not be like 50, it'll be like 80 or something like that at the end. But we can also see I'm getting the critical damage bonuses. And so in full combat, I actually believe the number is 400. There's one other aspect of, I think you get you get critical damage bonus if you crit recently. So my crit chance is around 50% and crit multi is around 400%. But then I actually get additional crit chance, an extra 10% tacked on, because now we're going to look at the link that's very important to this. Well, in fact, actually even more crit multi. So we're going to look at cast on crit here. And now this isn't like the guide or showcase on this specific build, but we're definitely diving into, all the tech components that would be related to Charge Infusion. So I have cast on crit, which is extremely powerful, especially single target with the bell, because I have Winter in here, and that in turn reprocs the bell every time it goes out, and so it just keeps feeding. It's almost like a loop. It's basically just a loop. But anyway, Eye of Winter is kind of a separate thing, and I'm not going to really discuss that one in this video, except the fact that it gives critical weakness. So if we look over here, we see critical weakness says critical weakness causes hits against effective targets to have a 0.5% critical hit chance can stack up to 20 times. This is just an additive bonus at the very end of the calculation. So we have increased critical hit chance, we got more critical hit, and at the very end we look at monsters have an extra chance to be crit, and anytime in single target, that's 10%. So basically I actually have around 60% critical hit chance, but I have even more than that because there are some supports like this that grant you even higher. So I'm getting ever so closer to 100% crit chance, and Flicker Strike definitely has around 100% crit chance on initial hits. You can see here because of ambush, 100% more critical hit chance. I mean, if the number says 50 and I have 100% more, well, I mean, that's basically 100. On enemies that are on full life, so it's not full uptime, but it's really, really nice. Makes for extremely powerful clear because I can land that huge hit and I can kill the monster, so I'm not like backtrack flickering. Instead, it's just blowing it up and keeps moving on to the next monster, and then the heralds are more likely to go off because if I'm hitting that hard, more likely that the freeze will kick in. You know, I do have cold damage and some lightning damage in here, even though it's a physical damage ability. This version of the build doesn't rely on physical damage from the staff, so we're relying more on the flat cold, flat lightning here as well, flat lightning from charged staff. And yeah, we're just getting a whole bunch of flat elemental damage into the build. And so Flicker Strike is more likely I mean, basically the 100% chance to crit on the initial hit. And so all of this crit is kind of feeding into itself, and so that more multiplier is very meaningful on Charged Infusion. So hopefully you understand a little bit more about how crit stacking, if you weren't aware of how all that stuff stacks together. And then the other side of this is for frenzy charges. So for frenzy charge, of course, I'm using Sniper's Mark, and this is a kind of a fun, creative way to get frenzy charges low investment, because the higher investment version of this will be yet another skill point, Combat Frenzy, which is of course very popular with Resonance Keystone, but without the Resonance Keystone, it just gives you frenzy charges. And I have done that before, but it's extremely costly because it's an extra skill slot and it's another 30 spirit. And it is more reliable. It's very reliable on maps, but Sniper's Mark is 100% reliable on single target on bosses anyway, because it just constantly keeps flipping over and over and over and over. In fact, it's actually quite reliable, 53% crit damage bonus, which could be higher if I leveled it up more, but I'm having issues with mana costs, so do that. But anyway, yeah, very strong, especially single target. Not that great in maps. It's not super reliable. You would have probably noticed in that little bit of a showcase early on. But anyway, these three give quite a punch because at the end we got Profane Ritual, which then is just the second alternate in the original, I guess the OG way of getting power charges into the build. Before people started using Combat Frenzy, we were all using Profane Ritual. So I really love the Lingering Illusion tech with the Minion Pact, which again a separate video is already made on that. So I got power charges on demand, can start every fight with full capacity, full power, full charge staff, full damage, max number of power charges. I have 6 because I have a Megalomaniac. That's the reason why I have 6 and not 5. And then the bells, the first 3 or 4 bells going off are going to kind of beat Charge Infusion to the punch. I'll be able to land those bells down, just kick off the first 5 seconds of a fight. I'm just do absolute boatload of damage with all that crit. Won't even actually, Flicker Strike won't even be worth it, and single target isn't currently the current iteration of the game. But yeah, Sniper's Mark, Frenzy charges. Eye of Winter, helps to reset or do a lot of damage to the bell. Profane Ritual feeds into more power charges, and Profane Ritual and then Inspiration or Impetus here, depending on what you need the most of. Really making this total package very, very nice. Huge amount of crit chance without even investing into crit. I'd say not even investing into crit. Of course, I'm investing into crit massively on the passive tree. That's basically where all of it is. But non-crit variants of the build still kind of indirectly invest into crit without really trying, and that's why the monk favors crit investment over pure attribute. Now, if you're running Gemling Legionnaire, you're not going to probably do this because you're not going to have access to just this unbelievable package of crit that's just everywhere. I mean, it's so convenient for the monk to focus on crit. I mean, it's just everywhere. There's still a place I haven't taken it, and then I plan to probably go down here for more of this. Although it may not be necessary. Although it is crit damage, so I mean, just imagine what Flicker Strike's going to do with 100% crit chance with these nodes and notable. It's going to be really, really strong. Even more crit over here. So it's just crit everywhere. There's even crit over here, which I'm not taking. And so it's just absolutely amazing for the very high-end crit version of the build. If you have enough attribute stacking, if you can go crit, if you have a real staff and you're doing a different build, that's fine. you can do this with a real build. Not when I say real build, I just mean not the meme attribute stacking version. There's one really cool last thing to mention. Let me pull a few points out of here. I just need to pull 2 points, because if I do that, I can get Resonance Keystone. Now, what is Resonance going to do? It means that I no longer get power charges, I get endurance charges. I only get 3, I guess. So what do endurance charges for? Well, that's for more defense. I don't know if you noticed it, but my number here went up quite a bit. I had 3,700 ES. So it's for armor, evasion, and energy shield. And the monk takes advantage of all 3. And I don't necessarily think it's a good idea to do this for the monk specifically, because then I would be relying just almost... I mean, I can't really get power charges super reliably in maps with just Sniper's Mark. Maybe if I did Sniper's Mark combined with Combat Frenzy, that would be a cool idea. I would then lose the skill speed version, which is, of course, real powerful. But I could get endurance charges, get some extra defense. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, there's a 3648. And then voila, 4268. That's a lot extra. And then we also get extra evasion. I can't quite remember what the number said before this. And that translates to additional armor, because we get additional physical damage reduction, not actual armor, but physical damage reduction through Protect Me from Harm. Okay, and then we get a whole bunch of extra energy shield through Spectral Ward. That's why I go pure evasion. That for this, and the better scaling for the spirit from Lead Me Through Grace. And then just a lot of additional energy shield, you know, on the helmet, the boots, this point, and then a Varana. This is a heroic timeless jewel. I get a lot of questions asked about this as well. Okay, that's coming from Circular Teachings. You notice I'm not taking any notables, so you don't really have to worry about the number on here. It just needs to say by the line of Varana on it, and you can see that is giving me a lot of energy shield. But part of that is because I have a huge amount of strength now, and I recently did get my Astramentus, like I said I probably would. But I finally sold a couple of those Against the Darknesses. I did sell one for like 66 divines, I think. In the end, I kept reducing the price pretty aggressively, but it did finally go off the shelf. So the build is looking real good. Don't have any other major upgrades. I think Astramentus was the final major upgrade for the build, but we'll see. There might be some things. I haven't even really looked at, you know, actual mirror tier gear, but I mean, it seems a little redundant when I'm just going this weapon. I'm really enjoying the build now, guys. I'm really enjoying the crit version. I'm definitely going to be showcasing more of the higher end stuff. Coming in the future, we will do a build guide on this, but this is a bit of a teaser to the guide, a little bit look into the crit, and look into this absolutely excellent skill gem buff. If you do this, if you go all the way with it, I can't tell you, I mean, just how strong that is. 12% more skill speed and 20% more critical hit chance. I better unspec out of this before I forget. Because that sounds like something I would just totally sleep on and forget. I'm going to put these lovely jewel back in here. Okay, but one last thing I want to say before we go is the last video I made was entirely focused on the super cheap version of this build, which is like the very beginning, less than a divine budget, almost like a meme, even cheaper than any sort of League Start build I've ever made. And, you know, I had a certain motivation for making that video, but you know, you guys really surprised me. I got much better positive feedback than I expected, because I saw the playback on the video before I submitted it, and I feel like I didn't have quite the right mental disposition, the right attitude in that video. It wasn't quite coming from the right place that would at least bring the most value to the community. And at any rate, I was a little bit skeptical as to how it would be received, but you guys really proved that I think even if you don't have the right attitude about something, if you present the kind of content that brings a huge amount of value to a lot of people, they'll overlook that. They'll just say, great, I love this, really helpful. And that's what you guys, that was basically the prevailing message from the last video. So I have taken that to heart. And as you can see, there's a lot more high-spirited in this video, because you know, I'm very enthusiastic about this, of course, the higher end stuff. But anyway, that's it. I just wanted to say that. I just wanted to say thanks for all the feedback on the last video. I will probably focus a little bit more on that kind of content moving forward. Not wholeheartedly, but you know, a little bit here and there. We'll see. But yeah, look forward to more videos. We're gonna have a major content patch coming out. It's gonna adjust some numbers on some things. I'm not sure if I want to come out with a build guide for the crit variant, the high end stuff, until before or after that. I don't really know if they're gonna come out with if they're gonna hit multipliers with a bunch of nerfs this week, next week, the week after, or if we're all just fretting over nothing and it's actually just going to be bug fixes and stuff. I don't know. But anyway, yeah, I'll figure it out. Let me know what you think in the feedback or in the comments. Give me whatever feedback you got. If you're using this, have you heard anybody else talk about it? Never heard anyone talk about it. It's freaking awesome. Not that good for non-crit builds, but if you're crit build, monk, and then you can also squeeze in the frenzy charges anyway, it's a lot of power. All right, guys, that's it for the video. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.